You bet.
I'll find.
All right, we're ready.
All right. Good evening, everybody. This is the Oregon City Commission regular meeting for January 19th, 2022. Mr. Riley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Adam Morrill.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
And Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Here. Will you all please join me for the flag salute? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right. For ceremonies and proclamations, we have a couple of items. For the first one is a proclamation regarding School Choice Week, and that is January 23rd to 29th, next week of 2022. And so I will be approving that proclamation for celebrating school choice. And then item number 3B is Urban Renewal Commission member appointment, Doug Neeley. So we had the interview for this appointment at our last meeting, one of our special meetings. And at this point, we just need a final discussion and vote, or a motion or a vote.
Hilarious, but I think Commissioner Neeley would be an excellent addition for reappointment to the Oregon City Urban Renewal Commission, and I would like to move that we approve his appointment. I'll second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Adam Morrill.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so now we're moving on to citizen comments. We have a couple of folks signed up to provide public comment. Mr. Dennis Anderson and Ken Basinger. Dennis Anderson, I have you first. You can, there's two separate microphones here. Yeah. So can you state your name and city of residence for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Take my mask off. Am I beginning, or you want me to begin?
Is there a reason why you need to?
No. Okay.
Okay, and so, okay, Ken Basinger, and you're representing the Kenema Neighborhood Association, so you get 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Y'all are just trying to change the rules on me tonight. I can see that right off the bat. You're
We didn't
challenging
plan this.
me. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Ken Basinger, Oregon City resident and chair of the Kenema Neighborhood Association. We had a steering committee meeting last week, and topic of the joint meeting that this commission had with the Historic Review Board came up, and we felt the need to express our desire to be a part of that discussion because it affects us directly in our little neighborhood. And I'll let Dennis say the rest.
What a team, huh?
Okay.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It's the first time I've been in this building. It's quite interesting the first time.
Can you
The
state your
echoing
name and city for the record?
Anyway, my name is Dennis Anderson. I'm a resident of Kenema, and I've been tasked to speak for the steering committee of that association and read into the record the letter from our chair, Ken, and to apply it forward in hopes that we could be a part and play a role in the decisions that might affect our neighborhood. So I'll get to it. I'll just read the letter. Okay. Dear Mayor, Commissioners, the Kenema Neighborhood Association Steering Committee is aware that the Commission, together with the Historic Review Board, are about to embark on potential policy for the OCMC revisions, as These deliberations and potential revisions, additions, deletions are likely to have a major impact on our homes, our neighborhood, our welfare. We request that our association have an early and significant part or a seat at the table. We seek a positive, collaborative participation to achieve improved mutual understanding to the benefit of the Kenema National Historic District and the city that it lies within. The impact of the guidelines, the code changes, whether negative or positive, will definitely affect our community. I go on and finish with, don't hesitate to contact me, the spokesperson, or Ron Baselinger, or our CNA vice chair. We look forward to your response in anticipation of working together. And it's respectfully signed by Ken Baselinger, and he's our chair. And then I list the 9 participants in our steering committee and the 3 principal people with email addresses and phone numbers are our chair, Ken, Ron Baselinger, our vice chair, and myself, Dennis Anderson. And that was my part. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, I don't believe we have any timeline or anything on that after our work session. Do we have any timeline?
You're correct. There is no timeline at this point. And so I do appreciate this coming to us, and we'll make sure to include that neighborhood when that does start.
Yeah, that was a joint work session with HRB and us, and it was really informational and a time for us to share kind of the points of collaboration where, or not really collaboration, but trying to make sure that we're all seeing HRB issues in the same light. But yeah, it's not on the immediate itinerary. I know OC 2040 is the priority right now for the Planning Commission, or Planning Department.
Caroline Smith, may I add a little something, not specifically about this topic, but it's the City Commission meets regularly with a lot of the boards, and that's what this was. We meet with the Planning Commission, we've met with the HRB, we've met with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and we'll probably meet with we've met with the CIC. So we do this on a regular basis where we have a joint work session with those organizations. It was not excluding anyone. It was not on a specific topic. It was general, as Mayor Lyle Smith said, cooperation. So, I appreciate that you came in. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but if there's stuff going on, you guys are going to know about it. Mm-hmm. Nobody's hiding anything. We just had them on our cycle, and we wanted to make sure we met with everybody on a regular schedule, which we kind of had with COVID. We kind of pushed all those meetings back a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so moving on in our agenda to presentations, we have the Citizen Involvement Committee report. I assume that's going to be Mr. Bob LaSalle, who is the chair of the CIC. I see him making his way up.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Bob LaSalle, and I'm the chair of the Citizens Involvement Committee. First, I'd like to warn you that if anybody says anything positive about the golden years, they're not necessarily so true. This evening, I'll be giving you a summary of our activities during 2021. And if you have any questions, I'll be attempt to answer them as I go along or at the end. It doesn't matter to me. The CIC has had a pretty active year in 2021, despite the restrictions of COVID-19. We're still trying to get the inactive neighborhood associations reactivated. And at this time, I'd like to thank William Gifford for his assistance in setting up a Zoom account, which has helped several of the neighborhood associations with their meetings and communications. A big help to a lot of them. At the first of the year, Kelly Reed, a city planner, gave us a good report on the historic review process. Then we had what I believe was the first report on the proposed development plans for the old landfill site. They gave us a very comprehensive report on their plans, which has since been presented to the City Commission and other organizations. Of course, the CIC members had many questions, and of course, that's an ever-changing proposal for the development. We were given a presentation by Valentia Mugia,
Valentina
the city's new
Mugia.
behavioral health.
Yeah, it's Valentina
Specialist.
Mugia.
Okay. I should have checked that before I presented this, so sorry. Also, Mike Mitchell gave us his ideas in regard to assigning volunteers to city commissions, boards, and committees. And he also presented a charter change for how to elect city commissioners. And I think you're working on that now, aren't you? Gary Herman informed us of mitigation funding that's available to help with the cost of ecological preservation, restoration of natural habitats, streams, and other environmental issues. And we hope that that free money is being pursued before the other cities use it all up. Quite a bit of money available there. After the terrible ice storm, we received updates from the Public Works on their efforts in recovery. And I'm telling you, not enough can be said about those hardworking people in the Public Works Department for helping getting things back to normal. So, John, thank you and your people for all that hard work. Great. During the year, there were several code changes that we were kept informed of. And of course, that seems to be an ongoing process. All the time, there's code changes. We had a nice presentation from the mayor, and she discussed some of the things she's concerned about. We also have active participation from Commissioner Denise McGriff and Commissioner Adam Marl, and their participation and information is really greatly appreciated. They do a good job of keeping us informed. As I said before, we continue our efforts to reactivate inactive neighborhood associations, and it's somewhat of a challenge. We've had some success, but we'll just keep forging ahead, trying to get more people involved. We've had several updates on the OC 2040 Comprehensive Plan update, and the Community Development Department has kept us well informed about that process, so thank you for that. We received a report from Kelly Reed on the downtown bicycle and pedestrian needs research that was conducted. Lucinda Broussard with ODOT gave us a presentation on the proposed I-205 tolling project. Well, as you can imagine, that was quite a lively discussion. We received reports on the housing needs analysis and the housing choices update. And since the CIC is primarily tasked with land use issues, we received several presentations in regard to that. Now, normally, land use issues will go to the neighborhood associations directly. However, in the case of neighborhoods that are not active, the land use issues need to be presented to the CIC. So we received several of those presentations. On November 1st, I remember that date, we had an open forum which allowed members to speak about anything they wanted. And it brought up both negative and positive things about the city. And the reason I said remember that, because I encourage all of you to watch that meeting. It might be somewhat enlightening. Christina Robertson Gardner, our city liaison, and I organized a Land Use 101 Zoom meeting in which several questions were brought up and hopefully answered. And this was a separate and informal meeting for anyone who wanted to participate, and I think it went quite well. we were presented with the land use issue that happened in Barkley Hills, now Elyville, which was really difficult for them. Pretty hard situation. But as a result of all that, Christina produced a land use appeal checklist for use in future appeals, which should help a lot, because the main thing was that nobody knew what they were supposed to do. Nobody knew about the timelines. And so this checklist will help a lot in making that a smoother transition if anybody needs to do that. We received quarterly updates from Public Works, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Downtown Business Association, all of which were very informative. Some of them, of course, they're not very active, especially downtown because of COVID, but they still got some things going on down there, and they're becoming more active now. Now, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, the CIC's fiscal needs have been easily met because the neighborhoods have not been having the normal number of meetings, so that we haven't had to mail out any notifications of meetings. But this is changing, and we'll start be having more and more face-to-face meetings. Now, fair warning to you. Fair warning. I'll be coming to you for more money. Okay? Because it's been several years since we've had a raise, and all the volunteers on the CIC receive the same wages as you do. Nada, nothing, zilch. So, but our administrative costs just continue to rise. So I'll be coming to you begging for more money, giving you good reasons for it. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work that Christina Robertson Gardner puts in to support the CIC. She's always there to promptly answer any questions, give good advice, and do anything she can to support the CIC. And she deserves a great big thank you. And if she was here today, I'd stand up and give her an applause. So thank you, Christina, if you're watching or when you watch this. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Mr. LaSalle. I have a couple of questions, but just for the record, because of something that you mentioned, I feel like I need to clarify. The City Commission has not received a presentation on the proposed landfill development. We don't get involved in that until, hopefully we don't get involved in that. That it stays in other areas with Planning Commission and elsewhere. But just to be clear, we have not received a presentation on that. So.
Oh, okay. Well, then you have to watch our meeting from before.
We've heard, I think we all hear a lot, but I just, for those who are watching, I just want to make sure that we're not breaking any rules. We're following the rules.
Yeah.
I have some questions, but do anybody else have any questions or comments? And Mr. Morrow?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions. I just would like to echo the commendation of Ms. Roberts and Gardner. As you guys know, there has been some turnover in the CD department. And so Christina has grappled the reins with great strength. And so I think she's done a commendable job. And then on top of that, Chair LaSalle and now Commissioner LaSalle, congratulations, by the way. We are very grateful for the leadership you've provided on the CIC during this very rough time.
I just wanted to add too, Christina's had to deal with some technical difficulties in getting the meetings up and running for the last couple of months that are through no fault of her own, and she handled it with a lot of grace when she probably wanted to smash the computer, I'm sure. So thanks to her as well.
So Bob, I just have one quick question. I think it's quick. So has the CIC ever discussed strategies or brainstorm how to get better participation for the neighborhood associations that are active? I think some of them still only get, a handful of people, and yet there are some other neighborhood associations who tend to get a better turnout. Have you had any success in that, or talking about how the neighborhood associations could be used? Because if we continue to use them as part of the land use process, and have them written to our comp plan and, as a kind of a clear checkpoint or point in that process, we want them to be active and you know, having input. And so, any thoughts on that?
Well, it's come up just as incidental conversation. It's never been formally addressed. Several years ago, there was a document put together. I can't remember the name of it now, but it listed several ways to try to get more participation from the citizens for their neighborhood associations. And it's always been a difficult deal. I know up in Park Place, where I live, we've had no lack of participation because of all the land use issues. And that will always bring people forward, no matter what, whether they're for or against it. You know, they'll come in troves. We've had 60 people at our steering committee meetings. But we've just tried to give people little hints about maybe some things that you could do, like door prizes, or, but
Yeah.
nothing that anybody's been able to come up with is a magic solution to get the people out there.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like the negative items or the catastrophes tend to bring people out, right? When something big is happening or something's not going well, that's when you generally can get folks to participate.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
that in a lot of things, so.
Yeah, we had one neighborhood association chair once put out a rumor that the entire neighborhood was going to come under a neighborhood association, or not,
Like a HOA.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be going to that meeting. I was chair of the TAC at the time, and there must have been 200 people lined up. And I'm telling you, I left early, but I was told later that they were glad there just happened to be a police officer in attendance, because it was almost a riot. So that, you know, he got people to come to the meeting.
Right,
Under false pretense.
yeah. Well,
Any help you could give us would be greatly appreciated.
well, I'm glad you brought up the budget. That was my other thing I was going to ask. I know we provide, you know, a modest kind of stipend for each neighborhood association to do postcards and stuff like that. But I think if there were specific line items where the CIC had ideas of trying to generate, you know, if we needed things that would try to push and generate interest and inclusion in meetings and participation, you know, I would be really supportive of adding a few more dollars. The amounts of dollars we're talking about is so small in the grand scheme of things. Maybe out of that 8.6 million of ARPA dollars, we can carve out $5,000 for CIC. I say that facetiously, but
The CIC is allocated $25,000 a year for all 12 neighborhoods.
it's a pretty good amount of money compared.
But you consider the number of mailings,
Right.
it goes down.
Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, I just wanted to jog your memory, Mr. LaSalle. Mayor Lyle Smith asked about brainstorming ideas to get more involvement. And I just want to bring up for the record that former chair Amy Wilhoit created a program during her tenure where neighborhood associations were mentoring each other. So they had members, I don't know if you remember that, but they had members going to other members' meetings so that they could make suggestions or help out with that. And that went on for a couple of years, as I recall, to work with the other neighborhoods. So, you know, this is how we run our meetings, or this is how we run our meetings, or this is what we do. The other thing that she had also implemented, she talked about a way to get people to meetings without it being something controversial is have projects. So some of the neighborhood associations have projects that they have that are ongoing, and that brings people out. And then, you know, when you got them at that project, you say, oh, by the way, we have these meetings at this times a month or whatever. And so those were two things that that I know that she had implemented that maybe can come back around to CIC for them to work on again. The other thing that I wanted to mention that you mentioned about the budget is that I think since I've been on the commission, postage has gone up 3 or 4 times, and even though we get a bulk rate, that bulk rate has also gone up. So that is one cost that CIC and the city have no control over, but yet, as you pointed out, the budget has been static. So that's something I think in your favor, and I would definitely support if that comes to us an increase. Because, you know, and people do, I know it sounds odd, but people do pay attention. They get the postcard and, you know, they could stick it on their fridge or wherever, and it's something they physically have in their hand, so it
Well, I'll
works.
give you a good example of that. When I was chair of the Park Place Neighborhood Association, I would send out a newsletter, actually 8.5 by 11, 3 or 4 pages, and the budget would cover it. But now the budget barely covers the postcards, so that's what we're. But I'm glad you reminded me of those things that Amy used to do, because I'm going to probably reinstate those ideas too.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the Kanema neighborhood folks in the back of the room. I know they had great participations when they were working on the bronze, the boots for Officer Lipke. And I loved that project, and the neighborhood, you know, led that and did a really wonderful job. So it was a perfect example of the neighborhood coming together and leading an effort. And we love it. It was a great job. So anyway.
And most recently, the name change from
For
Barkley
Elyville.
Hills to Elyville brought out a lot of people too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get controversy going, and you're going to get them in there.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you very
LaSalle.
much.
Thanks for coming. Keep up the good work. All right. I think we're ready to move on to the consideration of the agenda and the consent agenda. I believe Commissioner O'Donnell is 7C, the item you want to pull. 7B and 7C. Are there any other items from the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, hold your question. Just tell me what the item is. And
It's 7A, but I don't want to pull it. It's just a question.
if, this isn't the time for questions. If you want to pull it, if you want to ask questions, then we're pulling it.
I don't. I don't need to ask the question. I don't need to pull it.
Okay, Commissioner Smith,
7E.
7E. Mr. Lewis, you are not going to make it out of this consent agenda unscathed.
That's okay, one can try.
All right, anything from you, Commissioner? Okay, so we are pulling 7B, 7C, and 7E. We will move those to the general business. Why don't we take them before 9A? We don't have anybody signed up for 9A, right? For public comments, just us. Okay.
I thought we had one. Did Marty Gantz?
Are we confirming whether or not we have public speakers for 9?
What was it that you were?
For general business 9A?
I don't have anything recorded for.
Okay. So why don't we tackle these? We'll put them right at the top of general business. Okay.
I'll move the remainder of the consent agenda for approval. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so we're going to move on to public hearings. This is a public hearing. There's a request for a continuation for an appeal for the Historic Review Board approval. Ms. Aquila?
Correct. Good evening. Yes, the applicant is the appellant in this case, and they have requested a continuance to the date of February 2nd. And so that's your first meeting in February. They also granted a 120-day extension through March 4th. So that gives plenty of time for discussion and deliberation.
Okay. Tony or Mr. Kavaisman, do I need to open the public hearing? We can just make a motion to continue, right?
Correct. We have nobody signed up to speak on this, so we're just requesting a continuance to the date certain of February 2nd.
I have a question, Mayor Lau Smith.
Okay.
The way your statement was is they requested the continuance to February 2nd. I thought that was our responsibility to determine what the date and time certain would be for the continuance. You're recommending February 2nd, however. The applicant isn't recommending that.
I believe you're correct. I'm not sure what they requested, but they did request to continue the hearing. Yeah.
But staff is requesting that we continue it to February the 2nd.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I would so move then.
There a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded.
Commissioner
Riley?
Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. So now we're at general business. So let's take these public works items. 7B, general replacement for the Public Works wastewater division. This is for a generator. Who has questions for Mr. Lewis? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to pull 7B. I have no questions on 7B. Let me correct 7C and 7D.
So does anybody else have anything for 7B?
No.
It was my error initially. I'm fine with 7B in the consent agenda. I meant 7C and D.
Motion, go ahead and.
Do we need to correct that?
We already approved.
How about if I just quickly share what we're doing on 7?
Yeah.
So 7B is a generator purchase for the Kenema area. It's a temporary trailer-mounted generator. The generator we're replacing is a 1992 generator. This generator has plenty of hours on it. It's got lots of maintenance costs associated with it, but it also, the new one comes as a whisper quiet. If a generator can be whisper quiet, this is it. And so we park that one in the wintertime full time at Kenema. And there's been multiple times this year, in fact, where it's run many, many hours. So we're hoping the neighborhood appreciates that change. And with that, happy to answer any question.
Okay, so because we pulled it, we need a motion and a vote on this item.
I'd like to move we approve the generator replacement for the Public Works wastewater division. I don't need to read the specs.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so now we need to,
Redo the consent.
we need to backtrack and,
Yeah, I apologize for my error.
Should we maybe do 7C, 7E, and then we'll figure out 7D? Since
that's fine.
Is that fine?
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
All right, so we have item 7C, which was pulled. Who has the question around 7C? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I corresponded with John Lewis today, and I do in the interest of fiscal responsibility. This represents an excess of $90,000. It's just my habit that I like to see when these requests are made. My email, I'll just read it to you, that this is to Mr. Lewis. I don't see any stated justification for the purchase, and the report states we're not replacing a vehicle, but we're actually adding another vehicle to the fleet. We are not increasing capacity, as we will move the existing equipment mounted on the 2011 vehicle to the new vehicle. And I did not see any justification in terms of the remaining life of the existing vehicle or prohibitive ongoing maintenance costs on the vehicle we're replacing, or the potential for a trade-in of this vehicle to offset the purchase price. And on a less serious note, his department always complains about the lack of parking spaces. I'm not sure that adding 2 additional vehicles serves to solve that. So Mr. Lewis and I had that conversation. He's well aware of it. He's aware I was going to ask this question. I'm sure he's prepared to answer it.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. So again, appreciate the interest in our fleet because it is, these are important facilities for us. And I agree with the concern about parking because we do have that problem. The intention with this, and so I've kind of lost track of what these are. This is 7C, I think.
7C.
7C and D. I'd like to kind of respond to both those if I could, because they kind of go hand in hand, but the water department's acquiring 2 vehicles really. And in one of those packages, they talk about a 2011 vehicle, which we do intend to keep in our fleet. We've got
got some retired vehicles that we use for seasonal employees, and when a vehicle goes in for service or whatever, they might grab that vehicle. And so we have two that weren't listed in the commission reports that are 2004 models that are, I think it's a Ranger and a half-ton pickup truck that will go to auction, and the city will receive those revenues from that auction, and they'll go back into the water fund for future purchases. But in this case here, while we listed the 2011, that will then go into our expired fleet, and that'll be available for seasonal employees, or if one of the new vehicles needs to go into service, they'll have that kind of in that retired fleet. And then those 2004 vehicles go to, they'll expire, right? So with that, what I wasn't able to get in timely manner was a detailed list of the cost for repair for these vehicles. But generally, I would say we see, they fall off really pretty quickly, especially those 450s. And with all the hills that we have, they start having pretty expensive costs to repair. So I think that answers the parking. We're at a zero gain when it comes to vehicles, because two of those will expire and we'll send to the auction yard, and we're gaining two. One of the two, we're actually recycling some of the equipment off that truck and putting it on the new truck. So we think that's another efficiency that, we didn't articulate in the report, but that's I think that covers both of those vehicles. The only other thing I'll say is we did procure pricing through a government pricing like we typically do. And so that ensures kind of the lowest pricing we can get as an agency. It's a group purchase for parks and public works and other government agencies. So there is that. And then the other thing is that these are budgeted funds. And so they were intended purchases through the fleet replacement fund and listed in our 2-year budget. Happy to answer any of the questions you have.
I would simply say that I just like to see a report that's thorough in its justification in the future. I'm sure you've already counseled your staff. I want to see things like remaining vehicle life, prohibitive cost of repairs, potential trade-ins, which you just talked about, sending other vehicles. You're transferring equipment from the one truck to the other, so you're going to use this heavy-duty truck for I'm not going to beat this to death. I'd just like to see thorough reports that cost justify capital expenditure. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
I agree with that. We'll make that correction.
Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Lewis on item number 7C? All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
Well, go ahead. Well, since I challenged it initially, I'll move to approve it with the future corrections that we just discussed. Thanks.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, item 7E is our intergovernmental agreement with WES. Commissioner Smith.
All right. So I have a couple of questions on this. I sit on the advisory committee for WES. Was actually surprised it's on the agenda. So I have a couple of questions about it. We've talked about I&I frequently, so I think, and I don't have any issues with that. Clearly, that's something that the city's been working on, that WES is wanting to work more on with the cities. So I have a couple questions. One, this is, at first I was kind of wondering if there was different MOUs for each city. It's clear to me now this is one MOU or one agreement essentially for all 6 cities. How many cities have signed this agreement at this point?
That's a good question. I did get an email correspondence from Chris Story, and my recollection is he said there were 4 cities that had signed already.
4 have already signed.
And
Okay.
I don't know that he listed which, but that's my recollection.
Okay. the other question is, this is basically Wes's plan to deal with I&I by contributing 33% towards projects that the cities come to Wes to propose. Do they have a set budget for that, or do they have, because nowhere in here does it say, you know, what they've budgeted for these projects. So do they have a clear understanding of the amount of money that they're putting towards these projects and what their limit is, either per city or per the program completely?
Yeah, well, so this is a long-term strategy for them. I think they have, you know, from Oregon City, for instance, we've shared our capital plan with them, so they're very familiar with our capital plan. Do they have a specific number or know what our ask is on our timeline? I would say no, but what I've heard from their staff in that even this first couple of years, because they've also got a budget they need to work within, they're under the impression that they can cover our asks. We're one of the, what I heard from the staff was that Oregon City was the one agency that was ready to go, right? We actually have been delaying a project award because we wanted to have this agreement in place. And so they're well aware of that. And so I think they're prepared to meet their obligation of the 33%, or not obligation, their intention of 33%. And we intend to ask them for it. So we will, with this, we've already talked about making sure that because there's some guidelines in this that require the technical committee to authorize those purchases, which seems like a pretty streamlined process, an appropriate process to kind of vet what agencies are bringing to them. But we're confident that our projects are right in their wheelhouse for what they're trying to target. So I haven't seen an intention to do a budget adjustment from what they had as an adopted budget. So that's not totally answering your question, but it's doing the best I can.
Okay. And I know in the conversations that we've had, they didn't imply that there was going to be an issue funding projects that need it. So I know, we have discussed that. I have had it's no surprise or shock to anyone, I've had major concerns about any agreement we've ever signed with Wes. And that's because most every agreement that we've signed with Wes has been a horrible mistake. And so I read through this very, very slowly. And the one thing that still really concerns me is the 6 cities that are included in this, all have had different effectiveness of dealing with their own I&I. Some have done probably nothing. Some have done a lot more. Oregon City, I think, is in kind of the forefront of starting this issue and dealing with it. So the funding, the 33% funding for projects that these cities bring forward, I think is great. The problem is a lot of us have already put a huge investment into fixing some of these issues, and we're not getting any credit essentially for doing that. And so a city that has done absolutely nothing is proposing a project when we've essentially already done projects that we've not getting really credit for. It doesn't create an equitable kind of position for supporting these cities. And that hasn't been addressed. And the other thing that really stood out to me, I have a small understanding of what the TAT is, so you have the advisory committee, which involves representatives from the county, representatives from the cities, all this that advise the BCC. But and I'm assuming in this contract, when it refers to the district, we're really talking the sign off on this is the Board of County Commissioners, correct?
If I understand this correctly, they're approving the program and the agreements individually. Obviously, they're going to have to approve a budget in the future, but the sign off is at the technical committee level as far as I've read.
The sign up of this agreement?
The sign off on the individual project.
Right. So the sign off on the agreement is the Board of County Commissioners.
That's true. Yes.
Okay. So the TAT, which is the technical advisory team, which is the team that's essentially going to look at these projects from each of the city and approve them. Here's what it says in the in the agreement. That's TAT membership. It says parties acknowledge that thus far the TAT has been an informal advisory group of technical experts meeting to share knowledge, collaborate on infrastructure strategy, and that a more formalized procedure will be needed in order to allow the TAT to effectuate the purpose of this agreement. So right now, the current TAT is not in a structure to even deal with anything in this agreement. They're the ones making the decision. And so then it goes on to say, therefore, bylaws will need to be drafted. So there is no bylaws. Amongst other provisions, a voting procedure needs to be created. They haven't even created a voting procedure on how they're going to deal with these projects. And it then goes on to say that each of the districts, which is worded weird because it implies that there's more representatives of the district. It says the voting procedure with each district and partners having a single vote. So we don't know how many votes really there are. We know that that implies that each city has a vote, I assume. But what we're saying is we're going to be asked to create an agreement, which we know nothing about how it's going to be funded or how these projects are going to be judged against each other or how they're going to be dealt with. There's no procedure in place for it. I think that's bizarre. And I think we kind of need to know the structure of that committee and what that process is before we sign an agreement to say, we're going to do this. I think that's a big missing piece that we don't have a lot of answers for. And so I have concerns about that. And I won't go into all the other concerns that I have about Wes in this document, but I can't support it yet because I don't think I really trust that the end formation of that TAT is really going to be, I'll just say fair or even have an understanding of what we're really coming for. I really want to see that on paper, what the structure of that group is, who represents what, because when you're putting projects of different cities forward and not having an idea of how that structure is, we're not sure those projects are going to be judged fairly as they move forward. So I think this is a little too early. And that's all I'll say on that.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So I share some of Commissioner Smith's concerns, specifically the reference to the technical advisory team and the fact that it is transitioning from an informal advisory group to decision makers. And we don't know the future composition of it. As he already said, no bylaws, no voting procedure. I think that should be formalized so we know what we're agreeing to before we enter into it. And I think that's a small ask from any city. In addition to that, I wish, this is probably wishful thinking, I know that we've embarked on our own I&I program and it's probably made some significant expenditures to date. Gathered quite a bit of information. I wish there was some compensation that they would be consider. Do you have any idea how much we've spent on our own to date, sir?
Oh, I'm going to suggest we just let a $1 million contract. So we're probably, we haven't built it yet, but we're probably going to be $2 million at the end of this construction.
Yeah. But what have we expended prior to the agreement? Because it looks like those are not eligible for repayment.
Yeah, though we asked for a look back, if you will, and the concern there was, well, back to this, how far, right? And how do we, every agency is going to have a different look back, so that complicated it. So, to date, assuming we're not, so we went through all the moratorium projects, right? One could consider those I&I projects, but we went through all of those, and I don't know, that was like $5 million worth of stuff. And then, but more recently, we did some work up in the Rivercrest Basin, and we're going to do more up there. And my recollection is that was, with the consultant services, that was probably $900,000 worth of work.
Yes. And maybe this is spitting into the wind, but it's almost like no good deed goes unpunished. We did this good work. The result of this good work is that the West facility will have to process less effluent because we've already identified it, and there's no compensation for that good work. So maybe that's an issue that we can't resolve. I'd like to see us get some kind of credit for it, even partial. But my main concern, again, is, as Commissioner Smith verbalized, this tech advisory team emerging from an advisory group to a decision maker without knowing the structure of it. And I've seen other committees where they've been, you want to use the term, stacked in favor of a decision that you want to, for example, the county residents versus city residents versus who are really stakeholders in this and who should have a vote. So until that part was defined, I probably can't support it tonight, but I don't think that's a major step for them to define it and bring it back so that we vote with confidence.
So Chris Story with Water Environment Services is on the call, and he was willing to speak up. I think it would be worthwhile to hear from him maybe before that happens. I guess my background is sewer and I. That's where most of my time at Lake Oswego was spent, in sewer utility. And so I've been around it for a long time in this county. And, over the years, my feelings about Wes have kind of been a little more negative than they are today. And a lot of that's got to do with the folks at Wes now that we've been working through on these TAT teams, and just their director and Chris. They both kind of delivered on something that we've been, we talked to them about. In a way, 33%, our program, I think we've got about $18 million worth of capital lined up over the next several years. And so that's a big investment. There's not, across the metro region, there's, I don't think there's a model quite like this. I don't remember it in Clean Water Services. I don't know what Multnomah County might have to offer, but I think it's a big step in the right direction. Trying to look back, I would just say we have to do I&I reduction, because if we don't, those projects that we just we didn't expand them so big that we couldn't afford not to reduce I&I, right? So yes, there's a benefit at the treatment plant. There's a benefit within our collection system. If we don't make good progress on this and don't meet some of those targets of reduction, we're going to have problems in our system that then we're all going to be back to something along the lines, and I won't even use the word, but we're going to have problems in our system, right? So I hear what you're saying about the bylaws. We've talked a little bit about that, and maybe Chris can answer that, but I think they're moving in that right direction. It didn't sound like they were trying to hit a bar that was going to be difficult, but you're right. If you got 6 agencies and they're all asking for, $3 million a year, how do they fund that? That's something that Chris could probably be the best to answer. So if Chris is on, maybe we can ask him to step in. I think he's on via phone, or is he actually?
It's a question I have for our legal counsel and I have a question for Commissioner Smith. So I'd like to ask it before Chris gets on, because maybe he has the answer. So,
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor
just
Smith.
quickly.
Yes, Mayor Smith. So Commissioner Smith, so your advisory committee, did they have an opportunity to review a draft IGA, these draft IGAs, before they came to the cities? I mean, it seems to me that would be part of your role as this advisory committee, is to review these before they went out.
I have not seen it until...
This is the first time you've seen it?
But I also think I may have missed one advisory meeting, so it's possible they went over it at that. But it was, I knew this, yes, we've been discussing the I&I issue. Yes, we've been dealing with that, but I had not seen it in writing until this, this packet.
But it may have come out in a packet for your group. And the question I have for Mr. Weisman is that, obviously Wes has some sort of legal authority. How can a group that's been operating in an advisory capacity have some legal authority to approve projects? I mean, it would seem to me that they would be making some sort of recommendation to a body that has the authority to do that.
Right.
That was the only thing I had questions about. It was like, okay, this TAT group it makes sense as a group that's making a recommendation, but it makes no sense to me as a group that's has some authority or bylaws or whatever. I mean, what legal standing do they have?
And Commissioner Griff, Mr. Story is probably the better person placed to answer that question, but I would suspect it has something to do with delegation, where the County Board of Commissioners has delegated that role to that advisory committee. But I would defer to Mr. Story, who probably has a better handle on it.
I mean, I could see that they would delegate that authority to Wes, but I'm not sure about some advisory group. So that's my question.
It doesn't have any bylaws or any structure.
Okay, Chris Story.
Good evening, City Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to address you and try to answer
We
your
can't
question.
hear you.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
No.
That's disturbing. I was in a Zoom meeting earlier tonight and there was not any problems. I'm getting uncomfortably close to the camera, or can you hear me now?
We'll look at a report.
Hang on 1 second. Jacob, do you have any solutions?
Maybe you can.
The only thing I can think of is to turn your microphone volume up. You can do that by going to the audio in the lower left-hand corner of your Zoom, going to audio settings, and then increasing the volume at the microphone area.
It is now at the maximum.
There you go.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Excellent. Well, here's to hoping that I can back away from the camera just a smidge.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to try and address some of the questions that you have raised. You've definitely highlighted some questions that other folks have had, and we actually circulated the agreement to the advisory committee, but also to your city staff, city managers, public works directors, and city attorneys to try and make sure that we were providing something that would be of interest to the city commission. I heard 4 questions that were posed, so I will do my best to try and address them, and hopefully each will build on the other and try to see why we structured the agreement the way we did. The first was the question of, is Wes able to fund this project? How do you know? How do you decide? And what if there's a competition betwixt cities for various programs? This agreement, you will note, is set up for 5 years as a pilot project. Now, the target for I&I reduction is over a 20-year period. This agreement is not over that entire period because of the very issue that you're flagging. However, Wes is confident that for at least the first 5 years, having reviewed the capital improvement plans and had discussions with the public works directors, we can fully fund that 33% commitment for every project that's talking about coming forward in the next 5 years. So there's no constraints or competition between the cities. We are offering this in essence, a fully funded guarantee, because we want to incentivize cities to take action as soon as possible to address I&I. Earlier reductions in the years builds cost savings over time. So there won't be any constraints. That also gets to the technical advisory team, its composition and its role. That team was designated or suggested within the IGA as the place where deciding whether or not a project qualified, because we wanted it to be a technical decision, not a policy or a financial decision. That decision is being made at the policy level right now with you and other elected officials, and the financial side, in essence, with a full commitment. So the only question that's going to be posed to the technical advisory team is, does it meet the parameters that are identified in the agreement itself as being a qualified project? We have some criteria listed out there. Frankly, they're very broad criteria because we want to incentivize studies, after action reports, monitoring, as well as projects that specifically slip, lie in a pipe or some other particular physical action. Therefore, this morphing is a request on our part and a suggestion for the folks that know the systems the best, the public works directors, the city engineers, to be the ones to make that clarification or decision. That's not a role that they've played before. So indeed, to Mr. Kabaisman's point, this is in essence a delegation through this agreement to a group that hasn't done that before as being the body that makes that criteria decision. Much like you might say, oftentimes the city or others will authorize a grant program, and then they have a committee go off and designate whether or not something qualifies for a grant. You may not see every grant come back to the city commission or the board of county commissioners. The standards or bylaws for that committee, what we were hoping to do, it is composed entirely of those engineers and public works directors, is to have them be the place where they hash out their bylaws. So the group that's going to have to work together to review those projects, we wanted them to be empowered to have those conversations because frankly, they're all equally incentivized to see the work done. The funding for their program is funding for someone else's program. If they make the rules difficult for someone else, they're making the rules difficult for themselves. And because there is no constraints on funding, it is in their interest to be as simple and clear as possible in communicating when a project is or is not qualified under the agreement. I think that addresses everything, except I did hear some concerns about look back. That was certainly an issue that Mr. Lewis raised and other cities have raised. I will just note, for every city except one, I would say, we have heard that that city has done more than everyone else. When they talk about what they've done and the work that they've invested in and how they're ahead of everyone else. There's one city that sort of owns their problem, and that's the city of Gladstone. Everyone else has basically said they're doing better than everyone else. Rather than trying to reconcile with some sort of credit and look back and basically creating an argument betwixt the cities about who did better than whom, we're really just focused on what it means to move forward to address an area where we're going to realize common savings by acting regionally to address the I&I problem. I hope that addresses the questions you've raised.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I would simply say that my concerns remain the same. I think it's important that the document identifies the source of the upcoming TAT authority, which changes from advisory to decision-making. It would identify the individuals who shall sit on it, their number and their qualifications, and the composition of TAT, and there would be established bylaws. And I think that would clean up the document to the point where a review of that would make me more comfortable with giving a positive vote on it. Thanks.
I guess in reviewing, I've been reviewing the language of the agreement. Section 3B does specify that the TAP members will approve by majority vote of those present a proposal as being eligible, an eligible qualified proposal. So they are kind of already addressing a little bit in here how the vote will happen. They don't specifically state who all the membership is going to be, and they do outline the qualified, what it will take to be a qualified proposal. I do think the explanation provided by Chris Story was helpful of that they are providing they're essentially providing a technical review and just an approval letter saying that yes, it is a qualified proposal. It meets our agreement. The reimbursement actually happens in section 4 by the district. And all you have to do is have the approval letter and the invoice and show proof that you had, a valid expense with the qualified proposal. So it does seem like the actual payment of expenses and stuff is actually going to happen by the district and is not up to the technical advisory team. But all good comments.
I would say again, we've been working on trying to get contracting moving. We've got a couple of big contracts that we're trying to get that would qualify for this. And so there is a timing issue for us. We broke out some of the early flow monitoring work that just to kind of get that moving, but we've gone through a selection process to select a consultant to help us manage the program. And so, yeah, there's a time issue for us. I think that's important for you to know. I think we've kind of been on hold for a while because we were waiting on this agreement, and it matters.
So is the worst case scenario that we do our I&I program as we need to do and we don't get 33% cost reimbursement? I mean, isn't that the worst case scenario? This is just an opportunity to potentially get some of our money back. Like, I don't imagine we would enter in any I&I project, kind of hedging our bets that we're gonna, we can only make our budget balance if we get this 33%. I guess that's what I would say. I'd be like, if we're going into I&I projects, to me, this is icing on the cake, that if we could get this reimbursement, but I would hope that we would feel good enough about our budget that if the funds fell through from Wes or something as part of this pilot program, if it didn't work out, that we would still all be in the up and up from our stormwater program.
Right, so our I&I program didn't know whether or not we were going to see an agreement in a timely fashion. So our I&I program is funded, but this is 33% we're talking about on a major capital program. It would make a difference. One of the things that we struggled with was funding the laterals, the private laterals. While our first project doesn't necessarily incorporate laterals because we had to move on it, future projects would. And I just think that community's got a lot to gain by this agreement, and there are some details that need to be worked out, but I've got confidence that they'll come together.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I understand the value of it. I would not proceed with any I&I work until such time as this agreement was in place. Would not incur any additional costs until we have this set. And I personally am of the persuasion that any statements we make do not modify a written agreement. And I'm sure Mr. Kabizman would tell you that a written agreement takes precedent. Verbal statements don't modify it. So I don't think it's a lot to ask for those very simple clarifications that I think Wes could provide, or the managing board could provide, of identifying the source of the TAT authority, identify the individuals and qualifications, opposition, and bylaws. I don't think that's a lot to ask before we sign on to that. And I certainly would be more than willing to sign on with those simple additions.
Okay, so just to be clear, these would be additional documents providing clarification to us and probably to other cities, but I don't expect them to be amending this IGA if 4 other cities have already signed on to this IGA.
Maybe Chris can talk about timeline Chris, am I right? We've gotten signatures from 4 agencies, and you're scheduled to go to the Board of County Commissioners soon.
We have signatures from, or you might say scheduled signatures from 3 cities. Oregon City is the 4th. The 5th is probably out in March. And actually a conversation that John and I had and comments that I received back from Oregon City was a request to make sure that once a city signs on, it becomes eligible for the project, because John was indicating that y'all had some material work that you wanted to move forward with on an expedited basis. I think the mayor is correct in that it's unlikely, given that the questions that you're posing for, the clarifications that you're seeking is around the bylaws of the TAT and the way it works. I would say the delegation question is answered in the agreement itself, in that they're just being the technical approver of whether or not it's a qualified project and authorizing the issuance of the letter. But the expenditure of funds, that's all flowing through the Board of County Commissioners as the governing body of water environment services. As far as the voting mechanism and the membership of the TAT, that was the bylaws that were going to be generated by the TAT itself. What we could do is ask for that group to get together and work on that project, to bring that back to you if you would like to see that before the agreement is signed, or before you might say Oregon City is eligible to receive funds under that agreement once you sign off on it. But we do plan on moving this forward with the board and making those funds available to the cities that have executed the agreement.
Commissioner Smith?
Did you say scheduled signatures? Which cities have signed off on this already as of tonight?
Johnson City. Happy Valley is scheduled next week, and we're already the materials are already submitted, and Gladstone we're meeting next week as well.
Okay, so only Johnson City has signed off on this.
Right.
Okay. And which is the city that's been the least involved in this, by the way. It even states that in the MOU. I mean, it even states that in this agreement that they've been the least involved in it. So I think, yes, we've built some trust back, but what I know about meeting after a meeting and agreement after agreement with Wes over the last decade or more is we get answers in meetings that are not in writing. We get a document and we get pressure by saying something like, well, all the other cities are already doing this, or this city has signed off on it. And tonight it took a while to get that clarity that it wasn't 4 cities that have signed off on it. And then it was scheduled to, and then it was like, oh, well, only 1 has signed it. And this other pressure, which is, it's good for the city and we're gonna get funding, which is absolutely true. But that's an incentive to say, sign off on this. And then later on, we find out there's something not caught here. And it's happened time and time again. So I do not, I support the project. I support a lot of this, but the trust is not there. And we don't get the answers we need as a commission, usually for the last 10 years. I don't get the answers I ask for typically at a normal advisory meeting. And so it's going to take a while, as I said, meeting after meeting to build this trust back, and it's not there yet. I would like to, I have no intention of supporting this tonight. I think it'd be really great to wait the next couple of weeks and see if any of the other cities actually sign off on this, or do they have the same issues? And it can come back to us after that.
All right, so can we provide a clear, do we have a clear list or direction to staff on things that you'd like to see to come back? Are we?
We've stated them numerous times, and I'm prepared to restate them.
Do you feel like you have what you need?
What I understood was the bylaws, the makeup of the TAT.
Okay.
I would assume within the bylaws or how the votes go and whatnot.
Unless there's a motion. I don't think we need a motion. Do we need a motion to deny this? I think we can just let it ride. Okay, I think.
Did I miss something?
I'll be clear one more time. I want the document to state the source of the TAT authority. I want it to identify the number of individuals and their qualifications, and essentially the composition of the TAT and stated bylaws under which they will operate. The document included that and was very clear. I would have no problem proceeding with it. Right.
Okay. So I think that is 7E. And then, so I'm going to return to 7D. Commissioner O'Donnell, did you get your questions answered? I know Mr. Lewis tried to address questions from 7C and 7D when we were actually talking about 7C.
And Mayor, just to be clear, 7D was approved when the consent agenda was approved. If the commission wants to go back and look at that again, they would have to, someone would have to move to reconsider the consent agenda and bring that back and then pull it.
Right, that's why I'm asking if we're prepared to let it go. Okay.
Move on.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gebeisman. I think we're good then. General business, 9A is a resolution declaring an emergency and exempting a temporary warming shelter at the Farthest Heart.
Yes, Willa.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. So this came before you, I believe, in November of 2021. And I believe in the past years, the emergency resolution is extended from November through March. And this year there was a request for it to come back early to, I think, evaluate the status of a good neighbor agreement. I could be wrong about those details. Tonight, this resolution is to extend it from tonight until March 31st, 2022. However, the applicant would like to request approval to go through the end of April. And I believe there's a representative from Father's Heart on the call who can make that request to you. I did look at some of the past resolutions and they kind of vary. Sometimes it's approved through the end of March and sometimes through the end of April. And that is the presentation I have for you.
So we don't have a presentation plan though on this item. Okay, and nobody has signed up for public comment officially, correct? Okay. All right, so is there any questions from the commission? Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, thank you. My only question with this is let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th whereas it says it can house up to 49 individuals. I'm assuming that means also that's subject to COVID restrictions, because I don't think with COVID restrictions you can get 49 people in there.
Yes, Mr. Gantz to answer that from Father's Heart.
I'm just saying, knowing what we know about COVID restrictions. The other thing is that you're going to want some information about where we are with the GNA, Good Neighbor Agreement. And we had a meeting on, help me Aquila with the date, so I don't have my calendar up, but we had recently had a meeting with the working group it was created. That would have been our third meeting to facilitate communications. And what I advised them of is that our next meeting is February the 10th. We'll be reviewing the draft GNA. Myself and a couple of other people are still working on fine tuning it. There's some corrections and things that needed to be added to it. But again, it's not perfect. It's just a starting place. And that's what I informed the group that we met, but we had a good conversation. We talked about the wraparound services need, talked a little bit about the relocation. I understand Mr. Graham has contacted Mr. Gant and they're talking about that. Talked about some neighborhood issues. Other than that, met for about an hour and agreed to meet on the February the 10th.
Chief Band, did you have some information on the shelter and?
Well, I was looking to see if it had been updated, but one thing I know from the initial restrictions for code is that shelters were exempt. I don't think that's changed, but I just started looking for that, but.
Okay. They're exempt from those?
So Marty can probably answer this better than I can, but the guidelines have exempted shelters from some COVID restrictions.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard you say. I know that, and I'm not sure if the rest of the commission is aware, but they were also closed for a number of days because of COVID. It was posted on the facility.
Well, a point of clarification, you asked about the 49 possible. Is that fall under what the chief just said, that there's no restriction?
There are restrictions that don't apply to shelters, then that's a moot point. I just, knowing everything I've read and what I know about the COVID, there's only so many people you can have in certain places and those sort of things. So, and knowing that they recently just had a shutdown because of that would be my only concern. But they'll manage that, I presume.
You have a motion, or do
Yes, I'd like to.
Pleasure of the commission.
Yeah, if there's no more questions, I'll move to approve. You read the correct numbers. I know Mr. Kabaisman is going to say it. Oh, Resolution 2204, declaring an emergency and exempting temporary warming shelter at Father's Heart Street Ministry from planning code requirements January 19, 2022 to March 31st, 2022.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I think Commissioner Morrow has further discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to be clear, the draft GNA, there is a finished rough draft.
No, there is a draft. It's not a finished draft.
Right, but it is a rough draft.
It's very rough.
Okay, because the reason I wanted to bifurcate the original resolution was so that by this time we could have a GNA in our hands to look at and say there has been progress on here. And I recognize there has been progress, but it hasn't been tangential to the issues that we've been discussing for the last few months. And it wasn't just when we addressed it last for the resolution. It was back in August when we had the conditional use permit conversation. So I don't understand why it's not here. I don't think that was a lot to ask. And I said that was conditional upon my vote, and I still stand on that.
And I understand that, and it was a lot to ask. There were a number of people that were involved in drafting of this with discussions. This was going on during December, probably starting in November. So it got a little bit of a late start just because of people's schedules and calendars. But the effort has been made. Like I said, I explained to the working group that they will have it shortly. I just can't give you a specific day. It's coming. It is coming, I assure you.
All right, any other further discussion on this item? We have a motion on the table. All right, Mr. Wiley?
And I just wanted to clear with Commissioner McGriff, your motion was for the March 31st date, not for the April 30th date, correct? Right. Commissioner Adam Morrow?
No.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell?
No.
Commissioner Denise McGriff?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, that's all we have for general business. We will move to communications. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you. Evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So included in the commission agenda for tonight is the city manager staff report concerning the financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. We aren't requesting any action at this time. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have. The annual comprehensive financial report for Oregon City ended on June 30th, 2021. And the auditors issued an unmodified or clean opinion once again for our finances. So I'd like to thank Matt Zook and his team for putting together that budget document, as well as working with the auditors to make sure that they could do a thorough exam of our finances. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Conkle? Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith. I guess I have a question for both you and Mr. Zook. Is there some reason why the letter is not, it's a picky uni point, but why is the letter signed as the company and not the person that prepared the letter? It just seems a little odd when I read the whole thing and it's signed some sort of electronic signature with the company's name. It says sincerely, you know, it just seems odd to me.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I don't know the answer to that. I actually haven't really paid attention to who's signed it. Sometimes partners have. I've seen individual partners do it. This particular case, it was a company. So I'd have to get back on that.
Yeah, well, nobody signed it.
Oh, okay.
It says sincerely yours, Marina plus CO.
Okay.
I mean, I would just suggest that whoever prepared it should sign it on behalf of the
Sure.
company. I thought it was a great report. I think you guys did fantastic work. It just seemed odd to me. That's why I said it's just an odd thing that I looked and I thought, Well, that's just strange.
Okay. Well noted, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Zook or Mr. Conkle on this item? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Zook. Any other communications?
No, ma'am.
All right, commissioners, communications? Commissioner Smith.
I'm sure everyone will comment on this, but there are times, actually a lot of times, where some of us as city commissioners, possibly all of us, think to ourselves, what have we accomplished? And meeting after meeting and subject after subject, what have we really accomplished? And then you go to an opening of a building and you see what you've accomplished. And, we all attended the ribbon cutting of the Public Works and the Parks building, and it really hit me. As did walking through the police station, as did walking through the library, as did walking through the Ermitinger House, as did walking through all these buildings. I think we have done at this commission in the last one or two commissions prior, have done something that no other commission, I think, in the history of this city has done, which is virtually replace all of its buildings, almost all of its buildings, which I have to honestly say, I never thought would happen. I never dreamed that would happen. Although I never dreamed we'd have a new high school, and I never dreamed we'd have a remodeled Carnegie Center, or that we'd ever have any of this. And so I think that, those of us that have been involved, whether it's been 2 years or 10 years or 15 years, it's easy to leave meetings frustrated, and it's easy to go home with a headache and say, why am I doing this? And we all do that occasionally. But we have to stop in every once in a while, which thankfully we do in an event like that, where we get to see, wow, this is a different city. It is an absolute different city than the city I grew up in. It's a different city than I thought this city would ever be. And it's shocking. And I think I've talked about this throughout the years on a lot of different topics, but those of us that have grown up in Oregon City and got used to this mentality that Oregon City is not worthy of these type of things. And then to see and understand that, yes, we are. And yes, it's possible to fix it. And yes, it's possible to create facilities in places that we know this city deserves and that we know our staff deserves. That is a huge plus. It's kind of like being a teacher when you work every day and one day you just get this note from a student you haven't seen in 10 years. And you realize we are making a difference. And yes, it's frustrating, and yes, it's controversial sometimes, and yes, we get fed up sometimes, and yes, we get cranky sometimes. But that's the way this process works, and it's why we're successful, because we have, I think in the last several commissions have had really strong commissions that do have the debates, do get into the conversations. The meetings do take longer, but look at the results. Look at the results. And I don't know how to say it any more heartfelt or clearer than that. I want to thank every single staff person and every single commission, I would say in the last 20 years, that has really stepped up to the plate and said that this city deserves it, that this city deserves having buildings that our staff can work at that we thought we'd never have. I almost actually started crying walking through the Public Works building. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Because, I could say that probably it was so beautiful. I mean, it is, an amazing building. And it's something that we all should be proud of. And unfortunately, it's not a situation where we've had these openings where the general public can just flood the building and see what we've done. But hopefully someday they can, because it is something to be proud of. So thank you, everybody, for that.
Right. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, I won't be as eloquent as that, but I would say sometimes the rewards up here are few and far between. And yet we've all had those same thoughts that Commissioner Smith just said. But I can tell you, when I walked through that building, it was uplifting. A sense of accomplishment that we've done something. And when you realize, you think back to the day we bought that piece of property, we made sure that we got that piece of property. And we knew that by doing so, we were going to provide a centrally located facility to service the future needs of this city. And we made sure, and we knew that when we did that, we were going to improve the living situation in the McLaughlin neighborhood. And we did all those things. And yeah, sometimes when you're in the trenches and you're fighting moment to moment, you can always find something negative to look at. But you know what, for every once in a while, like the other day, and I joined Commissioner Smith, everybody in that project did a good job from the moment we bought it to it was designed, to what the end product was. No, it was not the Taj Mahal, but it was everything you wanted it to be. And you know what? It came in on time and on schedule and at budget. And when you do that in today's world, you've done something. So yeah, congratulations to everybody. Congratulations to you, staffers. Don, job. Thanks.
All right, any other communications before I go? Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I want to thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith, for forwarding the letter to the Oregon Transportation Commission. With the exception of a couple of little wordsmithing things, it was an excellent letter and got across the point that we have all been saying and saying and saying. And it's like, if we have to keep on saying it, then we need to say it. And I think that your signature was definitely required on this. I'm glad to see that the same effort was put into this as the first letter when we sent one out that said, hey, you're proposing this and here's all of our, what was it, a 5 or 6 page letter several years ago that we said to ODOT, hey folks, and we're saying basically the same thing, which concerns me because it's kind of like the bull in the china shop syndrome. They're kind of just saying, okay, we know you have breakables here, but we're just going to go full speed ahead and we don't really care that you're breaking everything. So I appreciate that fact, because this project, if it proceeds with the way that they are proposing, is going to, I think the comment here was, it places a unique, and I put unreasonable economic hardship on our communities. And that is how I feel about it. As I stated before, if we are going to be going to tolling, it's either all or nothing. They have to do everything at the same time or they don't do it at all. And they're just not interested in doing that. So thank you again. I appreciate this. This is a very powerful statement. I don't know whether the number of signatures will be required, but there's a move out there of people who want to vote on this. So I really appreciate this. This is significant. And I guess I will add my voice to you, Commissioner Smith. We were just discussing today that I've not quite lived in Oregon City as long as Rocky has, but I have seen progress. I tell members of the community that one person can make a difference. We have an incredible library now due to the fact that there was significant involvement from citizens, including the McLaughlin neighborhood, that made the project better. I asked Mr. Lewis to get our public works facility nominated somehow for some award somewhere, because it is a good example of adaptive reuse, of taking a building that had one use yesterday and now has a new use today, is energy efficient. Maybe there's not quite enough parking, but we'll work on that, Mr. Lewis. But it sort of, for me, represents all the things that are part of my DNA and what I believe in about taking something and making something else out of it rather than tearing stuff down, dumping it in the landfill, and then here we have to pay for that. And that's one of the things that scares me a lot about this whole COVID thing. We're throwing away so much stuff because we have to, and I just wonder what the long-term consequences. But let's not end on a negative note. But again, you know, I've in the past have said, you know, we've got an incredible staff. We all have a lot to learn, and I appreciate the give and take that staff, you know, is afforded us as commissioners, and also because we're also citizens who live here. We're not just commissioners. We live here, we breathe, sleep, and eat this every day. And I appreciate the dedication, and I know we all have our bad days, but I have more good days than I do bad days about being up here. And I just want to say thank you, as you both did, to all of our staff. I appreciate you guys every day, and thank you.
All right, so with that, I would like to close with some communications about the I-205 toll project. So at this morning's C4 subcommittee meeting, this was the primary topic that we discussed. And so I want to use this opportunity, since it's actually not 10 p.m. for once, to give you all kind of a little bit of an update. So I did forward to you the letter, which Commissioner McGriff referenced. There have been 2 letters sent recently, one in December and one in January. The first one was from C4 to the Oregon Transportation Commission, or OTC. And then the letter that I recently sent to you was just sent last week. Get my week straight. Last week or earlier this week, also to OTC, and that one was specifically from Clackamas County and individual cities that signed on. And yes, I did sign on to that letter. What is happening right now, the messaging is different. It has changed over time. There's a number of things that are happening, and what is happening, it kind of gets down into the weeds a little bit about the different processes that are going on that can help to try to mitigate what's happening. But so just bear with me. But I think it's important that you all know what's going on. There's multiple conversations going that are all kind of interacting with each other. And at this point, diversion is obviously one of the primary conversations that's happening. And as Commissioner McGriff has said, we have many times felt like this train was just going down the road and it was being pushed and there's no way to slow it down. In fact, I had a one-on-one with Commissioner Savas a couple of weeks ago, just having that same exact conversation. Like, is there any levers? Is there any way to make sure that ODOT is listening to us? I will say that we do feel like ODOT is finally starting to recognize what we've been saying for the past year. They actually are showing signs that they are hearing us, particularly around diversion. It doesn't mean they have made us happy or provide us the answer we want, but they are at least acknowledging and recognizing that they have not provided the cities and the counties in our region with enough information about tolling, congestion pricing, revenue generation that's going to happen from tolling, how that revenue is going to be applied across the region. There's been a few things. We've talked about the regional penny, how, we have made some improvements of, the collection of the tolls was going to be applied to the corridor. Well, I-205 is a long corridor, so can we sharpen our pencils a little bit and be even more specific? And then even after the project is paid for, there's still going to be revenue generation from the tolling, and so then what? And then there's no answers. There's no answers to diversion modeling. And we're currently unhappy with the plan of how they're attacking diversion, which is essentially saying the diversion that you're experiencing right now is okay, and that is our baseline. And so then after we build and we toll, if the diversion doesn't get any worse, then we're going to check that box and say that's okay. Well, the county's stance and what you'll find in the letter and some of the public comments that are going to be made to the OTC tomorrow is that we don't find that level of diversion that's happening now as a result of the interstate to be acceptable. West Lynn, Lake Oswego, and Oregon City have specifically said multiple times, we've all experienced how much our local community roads back up when there's an event or something that happens on the interstate. And that is the diversion that we already experience. So to talk about some of the levers and stuff that's happening, so Commissioner Savas wrote a letter and requested a delay. So there's a couple of levers that have to happen in order for these projects to move forward. And essentially we are pulling those levers. And this kind of conversation doesn't really get out all that much, so I want to let you guys know that there are things that are happening. So there are amendments to documents, and one is the Regional Transportation Plan, and one is the MTIP. And I'm going to look at John. I'm not sure that I can come up with the MTIP acronym at the moment, but there are two transportation plan amendments that have to happen in order for ODOT to move forward. Well, Commissioner Savas, and the vote on these amendments happens in a couple of different committees. We have staff, Dana Webb, participates in votes on behalf of Oregon City at JPAC. Getting that right, John? I believe it's correct. She's at JPAC. I participate at MPAC, which is the Metro Policy Advisory Committee. MPAC has a vote on this. Without these votes, and these essentially go to the Metro, we have Commissioner Christine Lewis, who is participating on Metro on our behalf. And then last but not least, the new chair of MPAC is Mayor Buck of Lake Oswego. So we have essentially just delayed the votes in all of these committees, not by a long time, but what we are doing is we are trying to specifically slow down this machine. We are asserting our pressure and saying, look, we do not approve of the way that you are continuing with this project and not giving us answers. So I'm not saying all this because I think it's going to solve everything. I'm just letting you all know because this is really the first opportunity, and we really went through all of this in a lot of detail this morning. The other thing I'll mention is that these tables where we're having these discussions, they're regional tables. And for once, this is one of the first items that we actually have regional support. We have Washington County, we have Multnomah County, and Clackamas County, and all of those folks on board to slow this train down, because they realize that we are actually being the guinea pig here. We're the first ones up, and Multnomah County and Washington County are not out of the woods, right? I mean, they've got to deal with this. It's coming their way. And so, shockingly, even Clackamas County staff are like, we've done the outreach, we've reached out to our partners, we have regional collaboration, we have regional slowdown on this, and essentially likely voting no on passing these amendments. So I kind of wanted to give you all an update. The last thing I'll say is I also forwarded to you all this morning the resolution that was passed by the city of West Lynn. The city of Lake Oswego also just approved, I believe last night, a resolution kind of addressing these items. Both Mayor Buck and I believe Mayor Walters is going to OTC. I'm sure Commissioner Savas, there is a Oregon Transportation Commission meeting tomorrow. And several folks I know are going to speak there on our behalf to kind of go over a lot of these things even in more detail than what I'm saying tonight. So I guess I pose the question to you all. If you would like to document formally where we stand on this via a resolution, I forwarded the sample to you. I've seen Commissioner O'Donnell's email, so just get back with Tony and we can work on drafting something. I don't think it's too late. I think there will be additional opportunities for us to participate and to continue to participate. So I just kind of wanted to give you an update. This is a super, super hot topic, and there is so much conversation. I want you all to know that there is, I can't convey it enough of how much there is coordination and communication going on amongst the cities. And I hope that our residents and our businesses know that we are working hard on this. Our staff are working hard on this, and trying to do everything we can to work on this to the best that we can. And I will say one of the things we are trying is to keep the Phase 1A project on track. We believe that it has funding to move forward. This is the Abernathy Bridge seismic retrofit and the adding of the lane. So our request is to make sure that the funding that we have and to use ARPA dollars to make sure that that project stays on track and is fully funded without ever dipping into tolling or considering tolling. And with that, I'll just stop there. And I think that's all I have. But we had time and I wanted to give you all a good update. Commissioner Morrow.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was going to wait until the next work session, but since we're talking about it already and it is relatively early for our standards, we also held a C4 subcommittee for the Diversion Committee today. And it was very heartening because up until now, the few meetings we have had, it felt like they were giving us the same information and then leaving us 20 minutes for the 10-person committee to ask questions and then saying, oh, our hour is up, we're done. And today they presented us with their preliminary report findings. The economic aspect, which is of great concern for us because of Main Street and our unique position there. I asked about that specifically because it was not in the presentation and they said it was forthcoming. So we will see about that, but it does seem like the conversation is shifting. And like the mayor said, they are trying to change the rhetoric a little bit. One thing they did in that presentation, if you'll recall the cap and trade, they switched calling that from cap and trade to cap and invest. They started calling toll and invest. And I called them out because we do want to see those investments, but given that this is an indefinite scheme here, what happens when those investments are over and you're just continuing to toll? So there definitely has been a messaging shift, which is a result, I believe, of all the pressure we've been putting on, but I really appreciate what the mayor has been up to recently and for that update.
Yeah, I guess I'll add the other point about diversion is that even if we can get them to, which I believe they are finally acknowledging the diversion and realizing that we want an answer before we'll give the approval, is that even if we identify diversion solutions, maybe it's local infrastructure improvements or something like that, there's no conversation on, well, what's then? Even if we identify them, where's that funding going to come from? And, it's one thing, we talk about that locally, what's the point of having a capital improvement list if we have no way, of ever coming up with $60 million to fund it, So yeah, we are finally, it seems, we're slowly moving that needle. So, okay. All right. And seeing nobody giving me eye contact, so I think we're good.
Staff direction, go ahead and prepare a resolution.
Yeah. I think so, yes.
Yeah, I think
yes.
that's fine.
And it seems like there's general consensus, so. All right, and with that, I think we can close this evening. Thanks, everybody, we're adjourned.